The era of the good girl is dead.
Kill it
Dead.
off. Kill it.
I've seen that same sort of rhetoric that people are going, oh yeah, everyone's got ADHD now. We just weren't having this conversation back in the 80s.
So many women especially haven't been diagnosed until it's kind of too late and the kind of mental health impacts have already happened.
I mean, you wrote an essay about growing up with a brother who is an extrovert, very different to you.
At school we were just very different characters, like you wouldn't have necessarily put that we were related together immediately, because it was kind of, stop talking in class, maybe you should talk more in class, that sort of thing.
A term that I learned in your book is RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria.
When things do come up and somebody disagrees with you or you accidentally say something and upset someone, it's kind of how you then deal with that. Oh my god, it's like, oh, I can't believe I got that wrong, I'm so sorry, I feel awful. It quite often happens with ADHD.
Gemma! Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I feel like I have met you.
In fact, yeah, I think we have done. I think that's just what you say at the beginning, isn't it? Like, nice to meet you. I'm like, no, we've
I
met before.
conflate reality with social media, and I'm like, I see Gemma every day, but then have I? It's confusing.
Absolutely not, but this is the world we live in now, isn't it?
I know. Are you good?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm extremely impressed that you're managing to do press for book with a very young baby still. How is the juggle?
Oh, the juggle is juggling, and I feel like I shouldn't have been surprised because I've heard so many parents, mums, say for so many years how hard it is to juggle everything. Shouldn't have been a shock. Wasn't a shock, but was still hard even though it was expected, so.
It's just different when you're living it to other people dishing out that sort of advice, isn't it? It's such a different thing because there's not only the practical element of you've got a baby to look after, but you're also trying to do things. It's the emotional bit that no one can really explain to you that takes up so much of your headspace, and it's almost inexplicable.
Yeah, even the tiny things like the practical bits in terms of like, I just need to reply to one email, which isn't a lot of time, so I shouldn't feel too guilty. But then like, she can see me on my phone and I'm like, we're not supposed to do that in front of her, you're not supposed to do it. And it's just, yeah, there's so many things. You try and be...
Oh, that one's hard.
Yeah.
This
is the thing. I know I'll settle into it more as well, because what I would say to anyone else in the same situation is like, nobody's a perfect parent, that's all, like all the rest of it, but when it's you, it's harder to take on board, isn't it?
Yeah, and you just try and do your best, and that, there's varying degrees of success depending on how you feel each day, as to how that goes. There was that sweet video, I don't know if it was on your picture on your Instagram or your mum's, where you were doing your audio book for Why Am I Like This, and your lovely mum Anne was looking after Bubba.
She was.
She'd been a lovely granny.
She's such
Is she granny, nan, nana? What's the terminology we're using?
We're still finding it. We were going nanny because that's what we had always used in my family, but we're leaning nonna at the moment.
Nonna, Italian vibes.
Exactly.
I like it.
Which we quite like it.
It's funny, isn't it? Like some of my friends' mums have gone, do not call me nan or granny, like the acceptance is low. So they've gone with sort of a nickname or just something made up altogether.
Yeah, which is the thing, and we still might land there, I don't know, but
Who
that's
knows
the joy of it, isn't it? She's not started talking yet, so I feel like if she just makes one up, then that'll be it, that's going to stick.
That is actually the way forward. My stepson, who's 22, he started calling my father-in-law Dan Dan when he was little, so now all grandkids call him Dan Dan. Instead of, I'm imagining Grandad. So
That's
he's
a
just
great
Dan
one.
Dan for life. So who knows what your baby will come up with? Your clever little baby.
I don't know.
It's so sweet.
I'm excited.
So alongside being a new mum, you've written this brilliant book, Why Am I Like This? My brain isn't broken and neither is yours. Many of us need to hear that, I think.
Hopefully that sums up a bit of I feel like reassuring is kind of the tone of what I wanted the book to be and how I hope it's come out that way. So I feel like hopefully that comes across, at least on the cover.
It seems from reading it that one of your coping mechanisms or your way of trying to understand why you feel like you do at certain points is to look to science, is to look to references and studies and to try and really get all of the knowledge that you can to form some sort of picture or maybe like a roadmap as to why you're feeling like that and also how you get out of it. Why do you think you're that way inclined?
I think, so at uni I did science teaching, so I feel like I've always been interested in science in general, I guess, and I just really like understanding why things are the way they are. I find it much more comforting in terms of like, don't know, whatever's going on, I just need as much information as possible about it, and I feel like then I can process it a lot more easily. But I think it's probably similar with lots of things in terms of, I mean, like something else I talk about in the book is like my ADHD diagnosis, for example. And I feel like that is quite a good example of it doesn't necessarily change anything when you have that information, but having the information is still really comforting, and still I just find it easier to wrap my head around things a bit more the more I know about it.
Do you think, if we look specifically at ADHD and your diagnosis, that that's helped you not only understand it, but have some sort of level of acceptance towards the things that you might have struggled with? Because I've certainly had that with people that I know, people that are very close to me that have ADHD, that with that diagnosis and a little understanding as to what it means and why your brain works in a certain way, they've stopped beating themselves up so much. That's been the main sort of positive out of it.
Yeah, I'd completely agree with that. I would say that's been the main thing for me, is like more so than it actually changing your behaviour necessarily. Because obviously as an underlying thing, it's not, ADHD isn't something that comes and goes and, you know, you don't get it or be cured from it or whatever. It's kind of, it just is. So yeah, I think the acceptance thing would definitely be my biggest positive of actually having the diagnosis. Yeah, purely for that reason, that just because when you're kind of sat in your house, struggling to start to do a task or thinking about all the things you've not done, or just remembering something you've forgotten to do, or just sitting there beating yourself up basically, and yeah, sort of asking that question like, ugh, like why am I doing this, like why is my brain like this? It does just answer part of that question, which for me has been really helpful emotionally more than anything else, I think.
So what led you, because obviously there's a point where you go, I need to go and get this checked out, what led you to go and seek a bit of advice and get the diagnosis?
So me personally, it was, and this is why I find it quite funny when quite a lot of the sort of conversations that people end up having on social media about ADHD do tend to be people sort of saying, you know, oh, it's like trendy now, or like everyone's got it, or everyone diagnoses themselves on social media. But the reason why I kind of looked into it was because another woman who was about the same age as me had been diagnosed and had kind of gone on her Instagram stories and talked about it. And kind of talked about the things that she struggled with, and then how she ended up getting this diagnosis, and it was all quite, you know, she didn't expect it and all the rest of it. And my best friend, who's known me since I was 5, sent me her stories and was like, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but this really sounds like you. Because she's, you know, is one of the people who knows me the best in the world and knows the things that I, you know, was really struggling with, and the things I had struggled with for the whole of my life. And that includes, you know, the things I don't like about myself, and the things you know, you sort of struggle with wanting to change, or just not knowing why you are the way you are. And so, yeah, she sent me those stories like, babe, is this you?
What
and I was like,
friend.
wow, okay, yeah, and it really did. And I sat with that still for like maybe a year afterwards and didn't do anything about it, but the question was still sort of ticking. And then the algorithm being what it is, you know, I started getting all of these like more videos and more sort of posts and information about it, and obviously was reading other things, not just on social media.
But it is so helpful. I think, you know, I've seen that as well, and it's a subject that it's close to my heart, and I've done a lot of looking into and learning as much as I can about ADHD. I definitely lean towards sort of similar viewpoints to you, that I want to understand it, and I want to know the whys and the hows, and really dig into it. And I've seen that same sort of rhetoric that people are going, oh yeah, everyone's got ADHD now. Well, actually, we just weren't having this conversation back in the 80s when I was a kid. You were just either the naughty kid at school, or you were distracted easy, you were the daydreamer, and that's sort of within the school sphere. But I think it was similar for adults out there that were sort of struggling relationship-wise or in their jobs, because the language wasn't there and the access point wasn't there. It was such a sort of a niche subject that would maybe be talked about in a medical sense, but certainly not talked about in what I think is a really healthy way today, with sort of, like you say, friends sending you articles or things on Instagram, and people just having a really healthy debate and conversation about it. It's and also, like, why would someone actively go, oh yeah, I want to have ADHD but I don't, so I'm gonna say I have? I find that really perplexing as well.
I think it's one of those things, like so many others, that if you don't understand it and you don't have any experience of it, or you don't know anyone who's been affected by it, and you don't know what kind of effect it actually can have on people's lives. And, not everyone necessarily, because, there's no hard and fast rule for anything. But so many people, and so many women especially, haven't been diagnosed until it's kind of not too late, but too late, and the kind of mental health impacts have already happened. And that's what the terrible bit is. And I mean, when you actually look at the situation, at least in this country, it's only relatively recently that the NHS and our kind of like public health guidelines even acknowledged that adults can be diagnosed with ADHD. So if you think about it, like for all of those decades beforehand, it's not that those people didn't exist. It's just that there was no framework that anybody even could have been formally diagnosed, because within our health system, it apparently didn't exist. So it's all paperwork at the end of the day, and we hate that.
Yeah, true. I'm really interested to know, from what I've looked into with ADHD, a very interesting part is the comorbidities. These things that can run parallel to ADHD, and it can be a whole plethora of things. But many people, and I'm not sure what the percentage is, but I think maybe more than half, but many people who have ADHD, it will come along with something else, whether it's depression, anxiety, it could be OCD, it could be ADD. There's all these other things that can come along with it.
Yeah.
Do you think that the depression you talk about in the book, the anxiety you talk about in the book, do you think they're comorbidities? Do you think the ADHD was there and then these were things you experienced due to it? Or do they feel separate to you?
I think they're definitely quite tangled up for me. And yeah, like you say, I talk about it in the book, kind of what my kind of experience has been of these things. Yeah, I think I completely understand why, in an abstract sense, being undiagnosed with, a neurodivergent condition can end up leading to mental health problems. I think a lot of people don't realise that, like ADHD isn't a mental health issue. And I think some people are surprised by that, because so many people who are talking about ADHD talk about the effect that not knowing they had it has had on them. And it is so sort of mingled in with poor mental health at this point. And it doesn't have to be the case. And I think that there's lots of, campaigners and activists and all sorts of people, even just people with lived experience, who are talking about this and sort of saying, it's not that there's something wrong with us, it's just that operating within a system and society and all the rest of it that maybe isn't aware or doesn't cater for, or just doesn't really have, like enough of an elastic waistband to kind of cope with anybody whose brain works a little bit differently. Like, it's really stressful to live your life in that kind of environment that doesn't really suit you. And, there's lots of, it's not just ADHD, there's lots of people with lots of different situations or personalities even, who just, when you don't fit perfectly or fit comfortably into what everybody else is doing, it is uncomfortable. And when you do that for years upon years upon years, especially when you don't know what the reason is, of course it's going to have a massive impact on your mental health. And that was definitely true for me.
I think knowing that the portion of people that do have or have been given a neurodivergence label now, who have been officially diagnosed, because we know those numbers, they're bigger than we even know now, but they're there and they weren't before. It feels like the systems we live in need to change more than the people diagnosed, which I think we're still looking for this. How can we fix this person, especially when it's kids? How can we make them sit still in a classroom? How can we make sure they're focused for as long as possible? And of course, there's a fine line, because you do want kids to feel confident in school and to be able to learn and enjoy it. But we are still living in a pretty Victorian system, certainly when you look at that kind of the narrow lane of how schools work, is that you are in a chair all day, or for a large portion of the day, and you're learning in a real sort of static way. And if anything, now we know that more people out there are neurodivergent, we need to change, like you say, that elastic waistband of like changing the system, giving more room for people to learn in different ways and for people to work in different ways. But I feel like that's a long way off, sadly.
Yeah, I think it probably is. And to think about it practically as well, I couldn't tell you what the answer is, to be honest. It would take somebody who knows much more than I do, because if you looked at the option of kind of, separating out people who had ADHD to let them learn in a different way, that doesn't feel right to me at all. But equally, I've I've taught in schools, like I understand it's such a hard job anyway, and already teachers are doing so much hard work and, you know, trying their absolute best, I know, to cater for every child in their classroom, and everybody needs different things, and it's just, you know, it's really hard. It's a hard question.
Oh my God, I am so in love with the teachers at my kids' school. I've actually like you are my friend now. We are friends. And I don't know how they do the job, especially when they're little kids and you've got all these different personality types, and now we've got neurodivergent labels that we're aware of and that we need to cater for. I don't know how they do it. They're saints. I love teachers. I'm getting a badge made. They're amazing.
Absolutely, I'll have one. I'll
give you a badge. You get a badge. Well, you are one, but also, you were one. We'll have a teacher badge, just saying how much we love them. They are the absolute best. What was your experience of school then? So you're in a classroom, you know, and this isn't even in this day and age where there's slightly more awareness. You're in an era where people aren't using that language. People aren't necessarily aware that kids might need slightly different structures or ways to work. Did you find it difficult?
Well, so this was the thing, and I think this is a big part of the reason why, you know, nothing was ever flagged when I was at school, because I really liked school and I did well at school and I enjoyed school, and that's kind of again is one of the things I think that comes up and is a fairly common pattern with women, especially partly because, you know, little girls, to stereotype, because that's the point of the conversation, are very often socialized into being more well behaved. Only in terms of, and I hope that is changing a bit now. Actually, I see so many of my friends who've got such like rambunctious little girls, and they're really sort of like encouraged to just run wild and do, you know, play in the mud, climb a tree, like do all the stuff that we've told the boys they should be doing. Like love all that. But I think, you know, in general, girls, women are very kind of, you know, are more likely to kind of be socially, you know, wanting to make people happy. So behaving themselves and not getting themselves into trouble.
The era of the good girl is dead.
Kill it off.
We're moving on from it.
But I guess the other half of that is, you know, the thing about, I feel like attention deficit disorder is actually like reasonably badly named, because it's not necessarily a lack of attention. It's more of, I'd say, a difficulty controlling where that attention goes. So if you're interested in something, you tend to be absolutely fine. And if anything, you can be better at really tuning in. Yeah, exactly that. And get really dialed in and interested, and you can stay focused on what you're doing because you're interested in it. And I like learning and I enjoyed school. So actually for a lot of that time, that kind of wasn't the area where I was having problems. So I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, it wouldn't have been picked up then, because you know, I can't even be angry at anyone at school or anything else about it, because like they didn't know. Like nobody really seemed to know, so, you know, it's not really their fault either, is it, I suppose.
So your hyper-focus luckily was in learning, so that's a brilliant thing, but leads to then sort of not looking into it as a kid, because you're just doing just fine. As an adult, what were the areas that you noticed, oh, actually, I'm struggling in this area, this is really challenging for me? So
a lot of things for me will be kind of managing my own time, I guess, which like it sounds bad because day to day that's not really what it feels like, but I guess what or when is maybe a better way to explain it. So when things started to get quite a lot worse for me, or when I found things really difficult and it really, really badly started affecting my mental health, was when I left home and went to uni. And I think that's because, so school for me, maybe I liked it so much because it's very structured, and, you know, the windows of you doing things are fairly short. So there's not, you know, people with ADHD quite often, you know, we're good at doing things at the last minute because it's the urgency that knocks down that wall of like not having the motivation, because it's not about being motivated because you have no choice because the deadline is now. And yeah, the window of time for things at school, you know, it's very structured, very timetabled. The people know you. If you're behind on something, or, you know, you've forgotten to do something, there's very likely going to be a teacher or a form tutor or someone to be like, you haven't done that, did you forget that, sort of thing. And it's, you know, the safety net and the people who know you, it's comfortable, or it was for me, that sort of schooly environment. But yeah, I think leaving home and going to uni, and it's all of a sudden like there's just less people keeping an eye on you, not even in a kind of, you know, safeguarding, like, are you feeling okay sort of thing, but just you know, if you're struggling to concentrate or struggling to start working on that deadline, you know, weeks before as opposed to a couple of days before, there's just not really as many people to notice, and it's on you all of a sudden. And I think that's, you know, probably the same for lots of people who leave home for the first time in lots of different ways, whether it is to uni or not. It's suddenly there's lots of parts of your life that you're managing yourself that you weren't before, or you weren't completely before, kind of without someone constantly seeing what you're doing. So that was when my wheels kind of fell off, to be honest, and all the kind of like, you know, you do this, then you do that, then you go to uni, and then everything you go on and and it all, yeah, I fell off that path completely. And yeah.
I mean, you say in the book that you felt trapped and limited in your head. At what point did you start to land on the words depression or anxiety?
Again, probably when I was at uni, and in, must have been, I think it was definitely going into my second year of uni. That was when it got to the point that I did go to a GP and sort of say, like, I don't think this is quite right. Like, I'm not happy, like in a way that feels like actually it's serious enough that I'm going to go and talk to a doctor about it, even though it feels really scary and awful and horrible. So yeah, that was when, you know, people had started to talk to me more about depression and, you know, what do we do about this thing, sort of. And it's been such a long time since then. It's almost quite hard to think back on it, and it's difficult because it's not that I hadn't been in contact with anyone even. So I think that's sometimes the frustrating part about it, is because is that I had been speaking to doctors and like all sorts of medical people then throughout, you know, my whole 20s for sure. And yet there's just the ADHD, it was such a big piece that was kind of unlocked that then it took like over a decade for that to kind of happen, and that has made a massive difference. So it's really
good. I know I feel the same looking back on a dark period that I had, that I think it's encouraging for people to hear that it can be so in the distance that it's hard to grasp what it feels like. You know, I can get the outline of how I felt in my head if I really wanted to go there. I don't. But it's possible to have a good life after a really awful period. And of course, when you're in it, you don't think that. You think, well, this is me for life. Everything's awful and bleak and nothing will ever feel great again. And obviously it's not just a straightforward ascent to then feeling great. But I think it's really important that people do get to hear stories where, yes, the journey to get there might have been undulating, but you're not in that place anymore. And maybe it takes a diagnosis, or maybe it takes, you know, just going through a bit of growth, you know, learning, growing up, whatever. But I think it's really good to hear that it's possible.
Yeah, and it's actually, there is research that kind of shows that is, you know, it feels quite instinctively like a really powerful message, but it actually is really impactful on people as well, which I think is always good to remember. I work as an ambassador role for MQ, which is a mental health research charity, and through, you know, working with them and talking to them and all that sorts of stuff, I've talked to them before about how there's research that backs it up, and kind of when you look at suicide specifically, which obviously is a very heavy topic, there's a lot of research that goes on into, you know, how do you prevent that? And one of the most powerful things that you can do is share stories about how bad it was and how it can get better, which feels, you know, as I said, instinctively, it feels like that's a good thing to do. But there are numbers to back it up, which I always enjoy. So, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely something that motivates me with all the Happy Place stuff, or even these interviews. Yeah. It's just hearing stories. And I can think back to books I've read or podcasts that I've heard where people have had an experience of feeling like the world is over, nothing will ever be okay again. And then actually, incrementally, there's change, which allows a new horizon, something different. I definitely needed to hear that back then. Did you feel like you were imbibing any positive stories or things that helped at the time, or did that just feel out of reach when you were in the depths of it?
I mean, I think it probably did feel quite out of reach at the time, but I think that's what's so kind of powerful about it. And I think a lot of what it was for me, particularly in that time in my kind of very early 20s, I just felt at the time like there had been a plan and I was kind of hitting the marks of the plan, and suddenly the plan was kind of absolutely falling to pieces, and I just didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what the rest of my life was going to look like if I deviated from that plan. And I think especially when you've only, you know, when you're in your early 20s, it's a really hard time anyway, because it's such a transitional phase of your life, and it does feel like everything's kind of the end of the world. But when you're in your early 20s, your brain isn't even fully developed yet. And you also have no frame of reference for what your life is going to be going forward, because all you know is what you've already done. And kind of the same way that every single generation, it's like, you know, people older than you talk to you and they're like, oh, you know, in my day, or it'll all be all right because this happened to me.
So what, you just fuck off.
Yeah,
I don't care what your thing is.
They're like, this happened to me. But yeah, and it's kind of like, well, you don't understand what's happening to me. But it's yeah, I mean, and it's true. People might not understand what's happening to you, but equally it is a true thing that, you know, there's so much better that things can get when they feel that dark. And I hope, that's something that, I mean, I think that's one of the really like key messages, obviously, of what you do with Happy Place, which I think is like just so
you're doing
valuable.
It too. You're doing it with this book, and I just think people being open about mental health is a new thing. You know, in terms of the history of the human race, it's a new thing that we're talking about this stuff, and it's so healthy to be able to just have open, honest conversations. I mean, something you touched on in the book, and this sort of fits into this conversation, is one way that we're all able to do it today is via social media. And we've all got now the opportunity to say, you know, storytell or you know, look to science or whatever it might be to talk about mental health. And you ask the question in the book, is social media a help or hindrance? I mean, I'm not sure any of us can find a definitive answer for that one, but what is your own bespoke feeling around that? You know, you've got over 10 million Instagram followers, which is insane. There's pressure that comes with that. There's perhaps even a sense of responsibility that comes with that. What do you feel about social media?
I mean, if I had to, you know, if you had to draw a straight line and it has to be, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I think it's a good thing. You absolutely can't deny, you know, all of the amazing things that can be achieved, and like there's so much like charity campaigning and like awareness raising, and, you know, we're so much more able now to kind of just have information from all corners of the world at all times. And it's, you know, that's such a relatively new thing, and it's a great thing. However, that technology, you know, has evolved at a much faster speed than our brains are going to evolve to cope with it. Literally, like, you know, within my lifetime, you know, social media wasn't a thing when I was a kid. It wasn't. So
phones weren't when I was a kid.
Well,
that's how bloody old I am.
But you know what I mean? It's kind of like, it feels like a long time. Like, I feel like you can't really imagine life without social media now. But actually, in the terms of, you know, the species of being a human, even in one person's life, we just haven't been equipped to keep up with it at the speed that it's changed. So even though I think it is overall a good thing, I think it's also completely understandable that there are a lot of things about it that we find really hard. And I think that is, you know, doing the research into those sort of statistics and like the actual reasons why that is, I found really reassuring. So yeah, I hope that when people are reading that chapter, there's a lot of kind of, oh, okay, of course I feel that way, because of course that makes sense. And I think, yeah, it's quite, there's a lot of, you know, just stay in your own lane and do you, and like, yes, be involved in everything and know everything, but don't read too much news, but you have to know everything that's going on, but don't be too involved because it's bad for your mental health. And it just all
that one
gets so
confusing.
confusing.
Me. I know. I feel like I'm in that conundrum constantly of how much should I know, and also comparatively, back in the day, people sort of knew very little. They would know what was going on in their own town, maybe, or community. And now we are sort of expected to have a great understanding of everything going on and somehow stay sane and then deal with the sort of minutiae of our everyday lives. It's so confusing. Do you have your own sort of rule book that you've created as to how you use social media and remain feeling mentally well? Have you got your own sort of rules and regulations about how you use it?
I'd say nothing hard and fast, but I guess if there was one rule, it's kind of just pay attention to how I'm feeling in terms of in my actual body, how do I feel? Because I think, you know, sometimes you want to just lay on the sofa And it's actually quite, relaxing and regulating and all the rest of it to just scroll for a while and switch your brain off. And if that's what you want to do sometimes, fine, I do. I don't particularly see a problem with that, I have to say. But if you notice if I notice in my body that I'm scrolling and scrolling and I'm just feeling a bit, start feeling a bit squirrely and like you're not really concentrating on that, but you're not relaxed either. And everything you just feel your cortisol levels creeping up and just feel a bit stressed, and you're reading the comments section and getting annoyed at what someone's written and how could they possibly say that, or how do they not understand that, and everything just starts creeping up a bit. That to me would be a sure sign that like we need a break from this at the moment. So I think
our brains can't take that on. It's crazy. All of those things in the comments would have been just a thought in someone's head 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And we didn't know we still don't know what other people are thinking when we're just in conversation.
Yeah.
But now we think we do. Like, this person, this is what they think exclusively. And of course it's a snapshot in time and it's ephemeral and it will be gone in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But because it's in black and white, it feels so weighted and real. I don't know how we're meant to take that on, and unless we really learn to not take things personally, which is such a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah, and it's that one of the main things about social media, I think, especially when it's stuff like that happening, or these sorts of conversations that are being had and it's on a public post or a public webpage or comment section or whatever, because in theory anybody in the world could see it. It feels like everybody's seen it. Yeah. So of course it feels massively heavy and like everyone's ganging up on you, and all that's going to do in your body and in your brain is kick into action certain reflexes and certain responses that, again, I feel like my catchphrase today is going to be like, as I talked about in the book, but I did write about this in the book.
That's what this is for. Yeah. Reference the book.
As I did write about this part, and it's kind of in an evolutionary sense, those things make complete sense, and those reactions make complete sense, and it's actually, I find it good to know it's, those ways that your body reacts and the way that feels, it's all part of a system and a mechanism that's kind of designed to keep you safe.
Yeah.
And I find that quite a nice thought, rather than, it's just everything in your brain is going completely haywire because it's so stressful and it's a bad thing and that's how it's going to be. It's all part of systems that are designed for your protection. It's just that they're not used to this environment, and that's why you kind of get into it can get really flustering and confronting, and it feels awful. And I think, most of us have probably had that experience online at one point or another.
Oh God. Well, I mean, you've got 10 million plus followers. That's a lot of people to contend with varying opinions and ideas.
Yeah.
And also moving into the realm of the sort of compare and despair, where we look and see what other people are doing and how they're operating. Yeah. I mean, how much do you think that's impacted you over the years?
Yeah, I think definitely kind of knowing that people are not watching you. And it's a funny thing, because it is obviously, I'm really, really grateful for it. And kind of, without having that sort of platform, like, I get to talk about mental health and I get to talk about these charities, and I get to do, like, I got to write a book and I get to talk about it and all of this stuff, which is amazing. But I think, yeah, there's a level of kind of introspection that it forces you to have, because that whatever you say, there are a certain number of people who are going to hear it, which is an enormous privilege, but also makes you wildly overthink everything you say, if you're anything like me. I literally dedicated the book to overthinkers, because they're my people. You are my people.
I hear you. It's the pits, and I think, everyone's on social media now, so we can all experience this to a degree, that it can feel stifling knowing that people are going to comment on anything, whether it's a picture, something you've written, a piece of art, whatever, that commentary is a given. I think feels stifling. And my fear with all of it is it stops us from truly exploring and exploring who we are and exploring the different boundaries that we might want to test out. And it also stops us from trying new things and actually peeling back the layers to be really who we want to be, like the true person that's underneath all these layers, which maybe takes a lifetime to uncover.
Yeah.
But my worry is that given the sort of mandatory element of commentary around everything stops us from exploring that. I can certainly sense that there have been times where I've diluted myself a little bit, or I've overthought something to a level of insanity and then I haven't said anything.
Me too.
Yeah. It's a tricky one.
It is, and I think it's... Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, we're just two people as an example, but there you go. Let's use that as an example. Everybody. It happens to everyone. But yeah, I think that's a very relatable feeling that you kind of just talked about. I know I certainly relate to that, and I think it is, you know, we don't... I don't think it's the absolute worst thing in the world, because I think it comes from a place of not necessarily, you know, I don't want people to be upset with me, but quite often for me, when I feel like that, it's that I don't want to upset anyone.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lot of social media people can look at and say, you know, it's so ego driven and so, you know, profile building and brand building and all the rest of it. And part of it is, of course it is. But I think is also just remembering, you know, it's just people at the end of the day. It's all people, and it's most of the time it's good people who don't want to say anything wrong because they don't want to upset people, not because they're worried about themselves.
Yeah. No, I get that. I think it's a really interesting exercise to sit back and go, oh, which one is it? Am I genuinely worried about upsetting people?
Yeah.
Or am I actually putting some barricades around myself because I don't want to get hurt and I don't want to like be seen as weird or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
I think that's quite an interesting moment to pause and go, oh, which one is it? I mean, also, another thing that we've got in common is being an introvert. I'm not often assumed an introvert, but I am one. I love communicating. I love talking. Sometimes I like being around lots of people, but rarely, because I find it extremely tiring. And I really like being on my own, and I need it to counter everything else that I'm doing. How does your introvertedness impact you? What have you learned about yourself from realising that?
I mean, I think if we're still kind of talking on the social media train, I think social media is almost like perfect for introverts, because it's socialising, but in a way that is kind of
away from humans.
Yeah, well, you set the boundaries on it, you know, and it's kind of it's the kind of socialising where you can go, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed now. Bye. Put that down and kind of take the breaks from it wherever you can. Whereas, you know, if you're in the middle of a party and you need a break, you go and hide in the loo for 10 minutes like I do.
I just leave. I just go and even say goodbye. I just go, whoop. I look like I'm going to the toilet, but I keep on walking.
Exit via the toilet. That's what I'm going to start doing.
I did it at a wedding the other day.
Sneak out the window.
It was so bad. But you know the conundrum is, I was then quizzed the day after the wedding. Oh, did you see such an event? So it was like there was a band playing or something.
Yeah.
And in my head I was like, do I lie? So my French exit was uncovered because I couldn't lie, and I said, oh no, I left before that bit, which felt awful.
Oh no.
But I thought, I can't lie. So French exits, they're not foolproof. Like they're, you know, you can still be outed.
Yeah. Okay, well that's a good one to remember. Maybe I won't be climbing out the bathroom window.
No.
Okay.
Don't do that. That's a terrible idea. I mean, you wrote an essay about growing up with a brother who is an extrovert, very different to you.
Yeah.
And I guess that's an interesting way to grow up, living in the same home as somebody who just reacts to the world in a very, very different way. And my brother's probably quite an introvert as well, but I've got best friends who feed off other people's energy, who hate being alone, who need that social interaction to really feel boosted, alive and inspired.
Yeah.
And it is a very different feeling. I mean, obviously your brother's gone on to have a career that you have to be an extrovert to be at that level of fame and that level of interaction with so many other people. How did you feel growing up alongside someone that had that extrovertedness?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. So at school we were, you know, just very different characters. Like you wouldn't have necessarily put that we were related together immediately, because it was kind of, you know, stop talking in class. Maybe you should talk more in class, that sort of thing. But I think it's very sort of universal, I think, among people. And like you say, I would be the same. I've got lots of friends who are that kind of person, who are really extroverted, and, you know, we'll be at the same party and you sort of get to the end of an event or something and it's me who's going, oh, okay, that was fun, but my God, I can't wait to be at home in bed, a cup of tea, just like calm down and unwind from this. Whereas, you know, that extroverted person, whether it is someone in your family or a friend of yours or whoever, is very
They're at the after party.
Exactly, yeah. They're like, where are we going next? And I'm like, oh, good God, absolutely not. Like,
no.
I couldn't. So I think it's that kind of thing that, yeah, whether they're in your family or it's someone you know in any other way, it's sort of appreciating the differences between people and, as I like to do, kind of understanding why that might be and literally the sort of brain and chemistry reasons for that I quite enjoy. Because now, if I'm like wanting to go home and thinking I've had enough socialising for today, even though I've really enjoyed it, I can be thinking to myself, well, I know what the chemicals in my brain are doing right now. It's not my fault.
Yes, I need to know that, because I think I spent a long time envying my friends that were extroverts and thinking, I wish I had that energy, and I felt boosted being in that scenario. Whereas I often just feel kind of awkward and like I need to just get out of there. It's all just too overstimulating.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel a lot of the time. But it just turns out we're just, we're more sensitive to these things. So our fun meter fills up quicker, and then everything that comes above that is too much.
Oh, my fun meter's full in like 2 seconds. I'm like, I'm peaked, I'm out. I mean, a phrase that a term that I learned in your book is RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, which can, again, going back to the start of this conversation, can be a comorbidity with ADHD. Talk to me about this, because when you first read about this term, something sort of rang true with you about this, right?
Yeah, especially, like we've just been talking about the whole social media and how much do you kind of censor yourself and how much do you worry about what other people are saying? When things do come up and somebody disagrees with you, or you accidentally say something and upset someone, or I don't know, any number of examples really. It's kind of how you then deal with that. And I think a lot of people, if somebody says to you like, oh, actually that wasn't quite right, you'd sort of go, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. Whereas I would go, oh my God, like it's like, oh, I can't believe I got that wrong, I'm so sorry, I feel awful, I feel like I've done something terrible, I feel like everyone hates me. Like that sort of feeling is what is part of what this RSD thing is about. And it quite often happens with ADHD, which is how I ended up reading about it. But again, I think it is just one of those things, and so much of what I keep coming back to in the book is just kind of, there's so many of these feelings that we have in private and think we're so weird for, and it ends up making us feel worse because you're kind of sitting on your own with these feelings and wondering what you've done wrong, or why you can't cope, or why everybody else doesn't feel that way. And actually a lot of other people do feel that way. It's just that we don't really talk about it and we don't understand why we feel that way. So I think, for me, it constantly comes back to the more information we have and the more that we understand ourselves, the more we can just give ourselves a break.
Oh God, I know.
Everything's hard. Everything's hard at the moment. Life's hard.
I hear you. And the RSD thing certainly rang true to me in so many ways. I mean, you tell a story in the book about mispronouncing a name from Les Mis, which was the most brilliantly relatable story. I mean, we've all done it. We've all said, I called someone the wrong name on a podcast episode once. Awful. I mean, I've done way worse on radio. Can't even get into that. But, like, we say things either without thinking, or we give something a try without really knowing. Like, that's part of being a human. But I think the pressure we put on ourselves today to get it all perfect, for everything to be right, is insane. And you really beat yourself up about this mispronunciation.
Yeah, I still think about it all the time, which is why I'm hoping it's actually going to be therapeutic to just like get that out of my head and just tell people that I'm thinking that. I know, it's too late now. Everybody knows that I've never seen Les Mis. I don't know how to say things.
Oh, have I seen Les Mis? If I have, I've forgotten about it. I don't even know. I think it's just long, isn't it? It's really long.
I think so. I wouldn't know. I've not seen it.
You've not seen it, babe. but this is the thing. We don't let these things go.
No.
And we chew over them. I have things like this where I could be having a really happy moment, and that's when it creeps in and it goes, hey, remember 10 years ago when you did this? I'm like, no, not now. I'm having a really lovely time. I'm really enjoying myself. Why does that happen then? Why?
Exactly.
But it's the pits. And also, those people that you mispronounce that name to when talking about Les Mis that you've never seen, so who cares? Those people will have never thought about that ever again.
Yep.
They would have gone on their jolly way.
But I do.
But you do, all the time.
Every week.
Do you know every damn week you walk past a theatre, there's a poster of Les Mis.
Every time I see Anne Hathaway.
I
love Anne Hathaway.
Gives you the shudders because of it. It's so good. But I had this one really therapeutic thing I did, and I urge you to do this. I mean, you've already done it. You've outed yourself in a book. But I had this really great chat with someone that I really trusted. And we had this really good moment where she said, I'm going to tell you something that I'm deeply mortified about. You tell me something that you're deeply mortified about. And mine was something that I felt so uncomfortable about. I don't think I'd even written it in a diary. It was just shamefully living in isolation in my body and my mind.
You went there.
And I went there and I said it out loud. And then she was really vulnerable with me and told me this thing that had happened to her. And obviously our reaction in equal measures was to go, what are you worrying about that for? Like, that's not even a thing. And it felt so huge to us, so huge, that we were like, but what do you mean? It's a huge, awful, big mistake that I've made, or thing that I did, or whatever it might have been for the both of us. And we were just like, well, don't worry about it. Like, give yourself a break.
Yeah.
And it's so lovely to hear someone else say it to you. It almost gives you permission to go, I don't have to be an arsehole to myself about this.
Yeah.
And worry about it for years and years and years. But it's so hard to give yourself that permission.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's really hard.
But I think knowing why we do that, I do find reassuring, because it is that thing, and it's exactly like that situation. It's everybody does it, and everybody has those things, but we all think that other people don't.
We think
and I think that's where it all comes from.
Done it. Like all the Beyoncés, we think, oh, they've never messed up. Of course they have.
Exactly.
Of course they have.
Beyonce has got someone's name wrong in her life. I'm sure she has.
Of course, loads of people. She makes people all the time. She probably just calls everyone the same name. Whatever. Knowing that you've got a past with poor mental health, as I have, you've got to be one of those people, like I am, who keeps an eye out for your mental health and does certain things or doesn't do certain things to ensure that you keep things as in check as you can, which is difficult on any given day, especially with a newborn baby. So what do you do, or what are the do's and the absolute don'ts to make sure that you're doing what you can to feel okay?
So I guess what do I do? I guess what I do is just keep in touch with myself, which again is kind of such like a nebulous answer, but I don't think, for me at least, it's not kind of incredibly strict routines that make me feel better. I think incredibly strict routines maybe would make me more productive, but I don't know if they would actually make me happier. And I think
very important.
I'm much more interested in being happy than I am being productive. Sorry to everyone I work with.
No, that's the healthiest thing I think anyone could say about work is if you're pushing yourself to be productive and you're fucking miserable, why are we doing it?
Yeah, which I guess actually the proper answer to that then is the thing that I have changed in my life in order to like facilitate my own happiness is I am radically honest about what I'm able to do and what I'm not able to do. In terms of, and it might be, you know, it might be things that seem silly, like, you know, if I've forgotten to do something, can someone just nudge me? As in, or, you know, just letting people know, if I've forgotten something, I really don't mind if you nudge me. I don't mind a double email, that sort of thing. Or, yeah, I don't know. Or things like, I know deadlines for me. So writing a book, for example, with ADHD was, you know, writing a book's hard anyway, as I'm sure you will know. But me, as a first-time author, so hard, so hard. But if I had, you know, had a last meeting with my editor and been sent away and said, okay, we'll see you in a year with a finished manuscript, absolutely not a chance. And some people will work like that amazingly because everybody's different and we all, you know, thrive in different ways. For me, I think in previous years, if someone had kind of said to me, you know, all right, see you in a bit and, you know, we'll see what you come up with, I kind of would have gone, oh, okay, if that's the way it works, if that's the way you do it, then okay, I'll go away and do this. Whereas for me now, I'm very open and happy to sort of say, like, that probably you won't get the best from me in that scenario. Is it okay if we work together and put, you know, maybe monthly deadlines in, or I check in with you in a couple of weeks and see how I'm getting on, and kind of break things up into smaller chunks, and not to, you know, make the accountability somebody else's problem, but I find by just being honest about how my brain works, I can kind of say, you know, I want both of us to be as happy as possible in this work scenario, so this is probably how that's going to happen. Is that okay? And, you know, the vast majority of the time people are like, yeah, of course. I don't mind several shorter deadlines. That works easier for me, actually. And you're like, great, fine, and everybody cracks on.
Yeah, so it's like good, healthy boundaries, talking, being honest. It's good stuff. What are the definite no-nos? Oh, I know one no-no. I know one of your no-nos. Actually, I wrote it down.
Oh, God.
Not being on your own team. I love that.
Yeah.
Which is what we've talked about. Just being an arsehole to yourself.
Yep.
Horrible.
I try not to do that anymore, which I did for so many years, which is, you know, what I was saying before, where you just kind of sit on your own in a room, or, you know, maybe you've gone to bed at night and either you're on your own or, you know, someone's asleep next to you or whatever, and you just lay there in the dark thinking, why am I this rubbish person who just can't do things properly? And I just refuse to do that anymore. I just won't do it because, one, I guess I know a bit more about how my brain works, so I don't want to just sit there and feel that way. But also, I don't know, I just feel like I've read enough and learned enough about, like, humans and the human experience to know that it is such a common thing and that is how everyone feels. Therefore, you know, why keep doing it if I know what the reason is? It just helps, like, untangle a lot of it. And yeah, it has made a big difference to me.
Good. We've all got to be on our own team. So bloody important. Well done on writing your first book.
Thank you.
It's no mean feat. And you did it. And it's there.
Thank you.
An actual book.
I'm actually so proud of myself. I'm not even going to lie.
So you bloody
I'm not going
well
to play it
should
down.
be.
I'm really proud of it.
No, why are we so weird about saying that?
Yeah.
Like, it's such a brilliant thing. And, like, it's tangible. It's like, it's sat there. It is there. It's amazing. You should be really proud.
Thank you.
In a non-patronising way. Gemma, it's been so lovely to chat to you. Really enjoyed that. And good luck with everything.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was lovely.